So I was out on a bit of an adventure the other day and I came across this truck and I thought, good grief, that's a tree growing right out of the back end of this truck. This is an old Weyerhaeuser logging truck. And the bigger question remains, this stump sitting right on the hood and cab of this truck. I hope there wasn't anybody in that when that landed there, but who threw it there? What threw it there? That stump has completely devastated the front end of this truck. Good grief, man. And it looks like it's been here for quite some time. That's evident in the fact that that's a 40-foot cedar tree growing right out of the back end. What can do that? What can throw a stump? What can snap a tree off like it's a toothpick? I mean, I can snap a toothpick like that, but look at the size of that tree. Snaps them off, blows them over, leaves them laying strewn across the countryside for miles. What has the force to do that kind of a thing? Yep, that'll do it. Hey everybody, welcome to the Pacific Northwest. More specifically, welcome to the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument here in Washington State. You know, shortly after this thing erupted in 1980, it was described by many as looking kind of like the face of the moon around here. It would be pretty bleak. When I went to college back in the 70s, this place looked a little bit nicer than it does today. I mean, look at this. This is very majestic. This picture here is taken from roughly the same spot as this one is. This place is called Johnston Ridge. When this mountain decided to erupt back on May 18th of 1980, it was like uncorking a giant champagne bottle. The top 1,300 feet and the entire north face came off of this mountain. That volcanic debris was coming out of there at about 500 degrees, traveling at nearly 300 miles an hour laterally to the north. That was fast enough and hot enough to knock down or tear out every tree for 230 square miles around this mountain. All that debris landed smack dab in the middle of what was then Spirit Lake. Mixing with that water, all that mud and ash and rock started heading down this little valley, which is the North Fork of the Toutle River, heading for civilization. It filled the Toutle River to 150 feet with mud and ash and tore out bridges, trees, and houses as it went. And that was only one of the problems. Once this mountain settled down enough to allow people back into the area, the next big problem that was caused by this mountain became very apparent. There were about 4 billion board feet of lumber land strewn across 150,000 acres around this mountain. Most of that lumber belonged to Weyerhaeuser, and they weren't going to just leave it laying there. Over the course of the summer of 1980, hundreds of lumberjacks were pulling lumber out of here at a rate of about 600 logging trucks per day. They did that all summer long. Eventually the task was completed, and it left room for the next phase of this operation. Once the massive cleanup effort was done and all the trees were salvaged out of the area, the next part of this puzzle was to put back what Mother Nature had taken away, replanting. But before this could happen, there had to be a bit of shuffling of land ownership around the mountain. This was to establish the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. You can kind of tell where that area is by looking at those mountains in the background there and see where the tree line ends. Anything that grows within the monument area will be growing because Mother Nature wants it to grow. Man will plant nothing in here. It's a slow process. A lot of the naturalists that have come in here and examined this area have estimated that it'll take anywhere from 100 to 200 years for Mother Nature to put this thing back to the way that it was before the day of the eruption. To this day, it still looks rather bleak. There are 3 different entities that have been tasked with the reforestation of all the affected lands around Mount St. Helens. Obviously, those lands inside of the National Monument are going to be handled by Mother Nature herself. But the other 2 have way different ideas from that. One of them is a company called Weyerhaeuser. Weyerhaeuser planted nearly 19 million trees, over 45,000 acres. Those trees were mostly high-quality Douglas firs, designed for maximum usage in the lumber and paper industry. Those trees that were planted back in 1980 today have reached a height of about 70 feet. I'm sure Weyerhaeuser considers its efforts to reforest the area very successful. The third group of people that were sent here to help with reforestation around Mount St. Helens were sent by the federal government. Teams of biologists were put in this area to help plant millions of trees on thousands of acres. They were kind of following the same idea as Weyerhaeuser, except they didn't want to resell it or harvest it, and they weren't going to just plant Douglas firs. Noble firs, pine trees, cottonwoods, and hemlocks were on their list. The noble firs are the ones that look a little bit more blue than the rest. This is what they call the Forest Learning Center. It was built and donated by Weyerhaeuser. It tells the story of the reforestation and rebirth of this area after the volcano erupted. This building sits 9 miles from the volcano and is still inside the blast area. It has a commanding view of the valley overlooking the Toutle River. This lovely building right here is called the Johnston Ridge Observatory. It holds a commanding view of this mountain, sitting right here on what was then Coldwater Ridge. When this mountain erupted and exploded in this direction, this ridge would have been the first place to feel the fury of Mount St. Helens. On that fateful day, back in 1980, there was a young volcanologist surveyor sitting here on this ridge by the name of David Johnston. He was assigned here to make observations and report back any unusual behavior. Well, at 8:30 in the morning on May 18th, 1980, some very unusual behavior started happening, and he was the first person to make a report. And that report went kind of like, Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it. Nobody ever heard from or has ever seen anything of David Johnston again. And in memory of David, this ridge and observatory were renamed from Coldwater Ridge to the Johnston Ridge and Observatory. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Well, I sure hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, go ahead and smash that like button. If you feel you might want to join me on some more of my videoing adventures, subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you along. So from Mount St. Helens here in Washington, I'll sign off by saying, toodaloo!